I actually want to start with a question around, someone looks at you, they see your Instagram, they follow your content. They're like, she has everything set up for her. She's beautiful, she's successful, she has multiple businesses. And people might think, that's how your life always has been, but it actually has been the complete opposite. So I want to talk about that before your life was more so settled in this new phase that you're in. So maybe we can talk about the early days of your life and a bit about maybe what your upbringing was like, because I think it was so fundamental in your own journey.
I agree. It's so interesting with social media. Now we kind of take things at face value, and it would be easy to assume that, I don't know, I was like born into this or it's always been this way. But my life was super different just, over 5 years
Not that long
ago.
ago. Yeah.
I lost 90 pounds in 2017, and my whole life kind of led up to that. So I was born in London. I've moved around a lot my whole life. My dad works for the United Nations. So I lived in London, then we moved to Switzerland, back to England. I've lived in New York. That's kind of where I grew up for the most part, is in Westchester, New York. And then I moved to Philly. I've lived in Colorado. I've lived in California. Now I live in Austin. So I've definitely been someone who had to adapt a lot. And I think, I had a pretty tumultuous environment in my house. I didn't necessarily, my parents did the best they could. They were awesome, but in a lot of ways, I didn't have a great example of how to deal with conflict or how to express emotion correctly. There was also this sort of like humor around wealth. When we moved to Westchester, the town I moved to was very wealthy. Majority of people were Jewish. My family were neither of those things. It was kind of just the town we were put in by the UN. So I remember kind of growing up feeling like wealthy people are different to us. They live a certain way and we will never be that way. So I think I grew up assuming that I wouldn't have success, and I never didn't think of it as a possibility for me. I kind of had dreams of, I wanted to be a TV presenter or an author or something creative. I always was super creative. But I think just because of the way my household was, I didn't have strong goals or aspirations, and kind of could tell from a younger age that I was struggling with mental health. Always leaned on a little bit more of the anxious, depressed side, even as a teenager, and had a hard time kind of finding my identity. So when I went to college, that was a little bit of everything came to a head because I had access to alcohol, partying, other people, and really found that I was using unhealthy methods to deal with this pain that I felt. So I really leaned into drinking and going out all the time. I had a real pain when I was alone. So I avoided being alone at all costs and made sure I was always around people. And in a way, I had the best time ever at college, but it was also the most painful time. And I think a lot of like my inner demons kind of came out. And, at first it was all fun and games for the first couple years. And then I hit junior year and things had really escalated. I was, drinking till I was blacked out. I was, I had no money. It was my first experience self-harming at that time. And Greg, who's now my husband, I was starting to date him. And he was the one who said to me, I think maybe you should see a psychiatrist. Like, I'm worried about you. This was the time I got diagnosed with borderline personality disorder. And that diagnosis, in a way, gave me a lot of relief, but also opened a whole new can of worms. Because at the time when I looked up BPD, I was like, well, what is this? Like, how do I get rid of it? Like, what do I do? It was like, BPD is the hardest diagnosis to receive. Therapists don't want to work with BPD patients. You have it for life. A lot of people with BPD end up ending their lives, like really, really heavy stuff. And to read that was very, like I identified with it. And I was like, okay, I guess that's what I'm meant for. And I felt hopeless. I was put on a number of, sorry, I'm telling a long version of this story.
No, it's important to get these details. So I appreciate it.
I was put on a number of medications, SSRIs, and I'm not qualified to speak on medication. This was just my personal experience, but I was put on antidepressants, anti-anxieties, mood stabilizers, and although at the time perhaps it was needed and I was not, I wasn't in a good place mentally, the medications completely numbed me. I had no sense of reality at all. I gained over 60 pounds. I stopped going to class. I was in my final semester of college and I was failing every class. Couldn't get out of bed. I was self harming more than ever. I'd lost all my friends at this point. So I was really just at the lowest of lows. And I remember, asking my dad to come pick me up and just being so ashamed. And my apartment was a disaster and just my whole life was crumbling essentially. I couldn't take care of myself. So I ended up moving home. Cold turkey came off the medication because I was like, this
Wow.
stuff's ruining my life. And it was hard. Like coming off of that kind of medication is really challenging. You get like weird symptoms and it just takes a long time to get out of your system. But I remember having this like reality check moment where I was like, okay, you don't have a degree, you don't have a job, you don't have any goals or ambitions, you're super unhealthy. BPD is essentially running your life right now. Like something needs to change. And at the time, getting a job or going back to school was too overwhelming to me. So I was like, the first step I think I'm going to take is getting my health in order. And, I was dating Greg, my husband, who has been bodybuilding since middle school, like super passionate about bodybuilding. When I met him, he was meal prepping and going to the gym twice a day, which was really weird for college. Like no one was doing that. So he was the first person I called and I was like, I want to do this. He taught me how to weightlift. He helped me plan my meals. I watched every piece of content, listened to every podcast I could about health and nutrition, bought every book I could, and just became completely obsessed. And for me, it was less about weight loss and more about just learning what my full potential was. Who am I really? Like, what can I actually achieve if I put my mind to something? And I ended up losing 90 pounds and changing my whole life. And now I have a career because of that transformative journey I went through.
And thank you for sharing, all the details because I think it's important to talk about. I'm just so amazed how it clearly you hit complete rock bottom. It seems like you actually hit rock bottom multiple times until it came to the point where you mentioned you dropped out of school, you moved in with your dad, you came off cold turkey on all these medications. And I actually did not know that you and Greg were dating even back then. Because my question was like, how did you even, because sometimes when you're in that low position, you don't even have the hope. You don't even know what the next step could be. Like, let me figure out my health. So it seems like he was kind of showing you maybe by example. And that's what really allowed you to kind of take that first step because you didn't really sit in that victim mentality for forever. You were able to kind of shift it. So it was through his example. Would you say that you were able to see another vision for yourself?
I feel like Greg is the perfect example of leading by example. He was
Sure.
never someone to push me to get in the gym. He was never like, come with me, or he just literally lived his life the way he wanted to live it. And I was observing. And I think it was the first time I'd ever really witnessed someone like truly commit to something. And I was really inspired by that. I think, as you said, victim mentality was a huge piece of the puzzle for me. And having that reality check moment was really the first time that I looked in the mirror and I was like, you did this. Like, instead of looking for other excuses, other people, who can I blame? What can I blame? It was like, you're in this position because you did this. You are the only person that's going to get yourself out. And I think that was such a big shift in the way that I think and something that I still apply today and took to my business because prior to that, if you spend your life blaming other people, regardless of how awful your situation is, like some people are dealt really bad cards, but at the end of the day, it's the way that you react and the way you handle it and the story you tell yourself.
Mm.
So, yeah, it was a huge learning lesson for me.
Yeah. And to be in that position where you had mentioned, this personality disorder that was brought to you when you were in college and you're reading all these things and, reading these horrible, I guess, I don't even know if side effects is the right word. Would you say that your health journey when you started lifting weights, changing your diet, losing that weight, did you also feel a shift in your mental health? And were you still working with a therapist? Like, how did you manage that aspect?
Yeah, such a good question. I think for me, nutrition was the first step, and it was the biggest shift I've seen mentally ever. Like, BPD was essentially running my life, and it kind of felt like my brain was on fire all the time. I was
Yeah.
very reactive, very emotional. I lived in this world. And the second I started, so for example, like my breakfast before my fitness journey was like two muffins and a giant iced coffee with milk and sugar. And starting my day off that way with this sugar rush and
Oh
this
my gosh.
caffeine, no nutrients, no protein, no healthy fats, I was giving myself a bad start. And just by switching to eggs and blueberries and oatmeal or just like a healthier choice, I felt like my brain just like calmed down and I could feel the endorphins from the exercise. And I think the reason I kept going wasn't because I saw crazy physical results right away. It was because I felt better. And I was like, oh, I think I can actually tackle hard things much easier if I'm feeling this way. So, and I remember my dad before my journey when I was struggling really badly gave me this book called Food is Medicine. And I remember like laughing in his face and being like, oh my God, you think food's gonna help me? Food changed my whole life. I really believe that. I do think food is medicine. So, yes, massive mental health benefits as well.
Oh my gosh. I mean, even with me, like I will significantly notice if I'm not eating the right meal, my anxiety is a little bit higher. I feel like running the business and the podcast, things feel more overwhelming. So, wellness for me has always been how do I support my mental health, how I feel? And food is so foundational. And even like how much you're eating. For so long, I was like, I wasn't even eating enough protein or enough fats. And similar to you, I was like, oh, wow, I actually feel incredible. Like, why were we not talking about this years ago? I'm glad we are now. There's more awareness, but it's cool to see what a fundamental shift it made in your life. So, you're feeling significantly better. What I find also so interesting is that you started your first business when you were quite young. I believe you were 23 and you started this podcast saying, you didn't really have any role models when it came to like entrepreneurship. You didn't have big goals for yourself. So, and, I think even at the time you might have gotten a job at Orange Theory. So, how did you go from having this mentality of not having these big goals, not seeing entrepreneurs around you to kind of falling into starting your own business?
Yeah, it's pretty funny actually, because if you'd asked me during college, I was like, no, I'm not interested in business. Like, I did horrible in economics. I can't do numbers. Like, that's not for me. But after my fitness journey, I had this like burning desire to share what I learned because I was like, okay, I just completely changed my life doing this thing. And it was hard. Like, don't get me wrong, losing 90 pounds wasn't easy, but I completely, like, I feel like I chipped away at who I was and found this person that I really loved. And I had this work ethic and this drive. And by no means was I perfect, but I was like, I feel like I just found the secret to happiness. And I'm sure so many people can relate to that rock bottom feeling, regardless of it being a different situation. So I didn't share on social media at all during my fitness journey. It was a very like personal, private journey. But I first posted a before and after in November of 2017. And that was like how my brand began, essentially, was this one photo. It was getting reposted on big fitness pages and getting sent around.
Wow.
And I was getting all of these messages like, how did you do it? What workout did you follow? What nutrition plan? And to me, I in my head, I wasn't like, oh, I'm going to start a business. I was just like, oh, people want to know how I did it. Like, I'll just go to Barnes and Noble and type it up really quick. And having Greg by my side, Greg is very entrepreneurial.
Okay.
You have to meet him at some point. He's like the epitome of an entrepreneur. He lives and breathes business. He was like, oh, well, let's make it $5. Like, let's just charge something super easy and accessible because you would have loved to have had this product. And I was like, you're so right. Like, I would have bought this. I did buy tons of different PDF guides at some point in my journey. So people would say, hey, what's your workout plan? I'd be like, oh, well, I have one. If you want it, it's $5. PayPal me, I'll email it to you. This turned into like a booming business for me at the time. I was like, oh my God, like, this is crazy. I could live off of this. So
Yeah.
all day I'm on my phone, emailing it to people. Greg's helping me. We're doing it together. I'm still working the front desk at Orange Theory. At a certain point, Greg was like, please quit that job. Like, just like, please. And I was like, oh, okay, I'll quit, whatever. I'm so glad I did that though, because it was a really good learning experience. But regardless, we figured out how to make a website, automate the process, we sold a lot of those guides, a lot. And it's the reason Bloom even exists, because we were able to put that capital into R&D for Bloom. And I always say to people when they ask me like how to get started, I think PDF guides are a genius. Like if you are an expert in something or you have information to share, like put it in a PDF guide. There's no overhead. Make it cheap, make it affordable. Maybe even do it for free at first. Before I even had the guide, I put out so much free information because I was just wanting to share it. And I think that's how you establish trust. That's how you grow a community. And yeah, things just kind of snowballed from that point.
Oh my gosh. And going back to, 2017, I think I was reading when I was doing prep on you, like you had 900 followers. It's not like you were balling with like thousands of people. Like you just posted this photo. And, as someone, we do a lot of content for our business and, starting out, it's very vulnerable to put your health issues out there. And so I can only imagine you have 900 followers, you post this photo, like, did you have any reservations to do that? Like what really inspired you? Because always those beginning posts when you put whatever you're going through, it's very nerve-wracking.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's a big barrier to entry for a lot of
Yes.
people. But technically, I was never intending to post that photo. I made a side by side for myself and for Greg, and I sent it to him. And I was like, look at my biceps. And he was like, Greg, Mari, you should post that. Like, you've made all this progress. Like, you should share it. And I remember being like, oh, what are people going to say? Like, all these followers are from Drexel and my high school. Like, what are they
Yeah.
going to say? But truthfully, I was very isolated during my journey. I think I needed to be. Like, I needed that time alone. And I didn't really have anything to lose because I didn't really have any friends anyway. So I just put it up. And honestly, I think throughout my career, like oversharing and being really candid kind of comes easy to me. And I've leaned into that with my podcast and, telling my story, but I really treated social media like a diary. Like, I think because I was lonely at the time and kind of going through this journey, I was like, oh, well, these people could be my friends. Like, let me share with them the recipes I'm making or the struggles I'm having or like the workouts I'm doing. So, yeah, I think that was very beneficial because it really established a good connection with the community.
And would you say, I actually was with a cousin recently and she's like, do you interview, I've done this for like 4 years now. And she's like, would you say everyone that you've interviewed, they're extroverts? She's like, because I'm not an extrovert. And I'm curious, like you have been oversharing. It seems like that connection community you were really looking for, but where would you kind of fall into that? Were you more introverted at the time?
Oh my God, yeah, I was so
Yeah,
shy.
I love it.
Like even at the beginning of my journey, like going to the gym was really scary for me. Having people like look at me, going to the grocery store was hard for me at the beginning. Like with my BPD, when people looked at me a certain way,
Mm,
sometimes I think the people who do really well on social media are actually introverts. You know
yeah.
what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. Because it like gives you like a safe way of expressing yourself and you don't
Yes.
feel so intimidated?
I That's so funny, Mari, that you said that. Me and my co-founder is my sister-in-law, and we do like B-roll. And I'm a lot more extroverted. Like I love to talk, but when you put that camera up from like a social media perspective, I'm so awkward. And I'm like, Kaya, you're like amazing. And she's like, I have a theory that if you're more extroverted, there's something that like isn't as natural. And I'm like, you're right. Cause it was just interesting. We were kind of just spitballing, but I agree with your theory for sure.
You almost get to, not that it's a character, but you're forming a brand on the internet. So you can kind of lean into like, this is how I show up online. Even if, I feel like I'm pretty much the same in person, to be honest. But yeah, for some reason, it gave me this feeling of safety. And I felt like all these women could relate to me in so many ways. So I felt safe too. Yeah, it really happened in this super organic way.
Well, I love that you guys, you got to a point where you were selling these PDFs so scrappily for $500. And you had mentioned, working at Orange Theory in the front desk, you finally quit, but you said you learned a lot there. I'm just curious, like what were maybe some of the learnings that you had?
It was honestly my first, I had internships, but it was like my first real job. And I was
Yeah.
cleaning bathrooms. People were throwing heart rate monitors at me. I'm like ducking in the class to get to people. And it was hard work. I showed up there at 4 a.m. every day to open up. And I learned how to have good customer service skills and show up every day and have responsibility. And for someone who kind of like, I don't know, like I wouldn't show up to class or I kind of
Mm-hmm.
coasted by. being average. It was the first time I really applied myself. I couldn't sell the program for the life of me. Like I could not make commission because I couldn't sell this program, but it was because I didn't love it. Like I didn't do it myself. No shade to Orange Theory. I know it works great for some people, but I was on my own plan and very focused on my journey. So it's funny though, because I guess sales is kind of a part of my job now, but it just comes easy because it's like everything I believe in. But yeah, I have a lot of love for that time in my life.
No, I love that because I feel like a lot of people might be listening, and I definitely was there back in the day, working in different jobs, switching careers, trying to find like what's the right thing for me. You have so many learnings from whatever the job is, whatever, whether it's front desk of Orange Theory or you're in an industry that maybe you don't love. Like there's always learnings and lessons. So I love to hear that you mentioned, yeah, there was still a lot of great stuff from
Yeah.
that experience because it's true, whether it's your business now, there's so many life skills that you learn just kind of working for other people. So I loved to hear that. So, you guys are doing quite well. You quit your job. You're like, all right, we're onto something. You're building this community. What was the impetus for you to be like, we actually want to do more? Because Bloom is kind of a whole different genre. So if you're doing well, what really sparked you guys to think maybe even bigger at that stage?
So after the guides started doing well, the first physical product we made was a resistance band. And I think it was because I felt like they needed tools to do the workout. So I was like, oh, let's make a resistance band. I really wanted, they were all like plastic and they would roll up the legs. And I wanted to do like a fabric strong resistance band. So I remember calling a ton of different manufacturers. None of them would take us seriously because we were so young and inexperienced, but finally found a manufacturer who would do it. We made 900, had them shipped to my dad's house. My dad's house was covered in boxes of resistance bands. We hand packed and shipped every single one. I put a note in every single package. I would go to UPS every day with all my bands. And that was our first taste at a physical product. And that took off quite well. I think we could just see that there was a need in this demo for a female who was new to fitness, wanting to change her life, but didn't necessarily know where to start. And I didn't really feel like anyone else was doing it right. I personally would go to like GNC or a supplement store to try to find something that I felt would work for me. And I had a really hard time because everything was very, I was like, oh, I'm not meant to be here. It felt very masculine and scary. Everything's like red and yellow and muscle destroyer this. And I was like, oh, this is a little much. So we started sampling for Bloom in 2018. And it was Greg who was like, I feel like you need supplements that work for you. And I was like, oh my God, you're crazy. Like, how are we going to make supplements? That's insane. But we started doing it. We called a manufacturer local to us in New York. We got
Oh,
to go
that's nice.
visit. We got to wear the lab coats and see how everything was made. And they were third party tested and they could help us build the formula we wanted. And I was like, I want to start with pre workout. So we made 3 flavors of an all natural pre workout, did everything ourselves. Like I designed the labels with a little bit of help, obviously, for like the supplement facts from the manufacturer, but I did all the artwork. We built the website ourselves. I did all the photography. I built the social media. And I was taking my community. I probably had like 600,000 followers at this point,
Okay.
taking the community along the way with me. I was like, which color do you guys prefer? What flavor do you think? Like, kind of showing them everything. I would YouTube all the time. And they were a really big part of the process. So when we finally launched January of 2019, it was a quick success. Like, and not that we had a ton of units, like, we were definitely like, didn't have enough money to have a ton of units, but they sold out right away. And feedback was these don't taste good. They
Oh,
were
yeah.
100% correct. They tasted like trash. But the formula was great. So we're
Yeah.
like, okay, let's keep playing around. We nailed down our pre-workout formula. From there, we made EAAs, protein, very gym focused. And it wasn't until 2020 that we started formulating for greens, and that was really where things took off for us.
Got it. I have so many questions. It's so fascinating. I love also just how scrappy you were because sometimes I think people overthink, like, I got to work with a big branding agency. And it's like, no, just you were taking the photos, you guys threw up a website, and it's like, let's just make sure you focus on good product. Like you said, the formula you felt pretty strongly. And if it sells, and I know, as someone, we have a magnesium supplement that, taste, I'll just say, is very tough to nail, especially if you want to keep it clean. I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, now I know why people just throw a bunch of stuff because it's very easy. But as people who we really care, I know that's not easy. So you launched this product. That was the number one feedback you had. How long did it take for you guys to nail the flavoring for those pre-workouts for that V2?
Yeah, it wasn't easy. The flavor profiles are tough. That was a long time ago. I forget how long it took for that, but for greens, it
Okay,
took
for greens. Yeah.
a long time. And I remember I needed the formula to be obviously work. I was like, I need this to help my digestion. I need to feel good on it and have the flavors be amazing. So that probably took 6 months of flavor profiling. I remember traveling with it, trying it on vacations, and the formula was like the thing that really sold me on it. And I was like telling the community about how it was making me feel and how it was working. And that was the product that we kept restocking because we didn't have enough. We were 100% self-funded, no investments. So we were put all of our money was in Bloom, every
Yeah.
dollar. So we just kept restocking, selling out, restocking, selling out, because we couldn't afford to keep enough in stock. And I actually remember feeling like, oh my God, people are going to be so mad at me because I can't keep this product in stock, and like going on and apologizing. It was like a whole thing. But that was really the moment we took a shift into the wellness space and kind of more of a lifestyle brand than a gym brand. And I think at the same time, COVID happening, it was this perfect storm. My content really shifted. I was pretty much our only influencer at this point. And yeah, it just resonated with people. And that's when things really, took off. And we ultimately moved to LA, but I don't want to get too far into it.
Yeah, no, we'll definitely get there. But it's so interesting how you guys started as, with pre-workout supplements and then kind of shifted more broadly. And the green powders was the first product that I think opened you guys out for that. Was it your idea to do a green powder to start, or did you have your community asking for it? Like, because that was a huge unlocking. So how did you guys even think about that one product?
It was me. And I was like, I really want something. I wasn't good at eating my vegetables. I've gotten better.
Same.
But at the time, I was like, I'm more of like a protein, like,
Yeah,
you know,
same.
um, my diet has shifted over the years. But at the time, I was like, I need to get in all my vitamins and nutrients in one scoop. And I feel like everyone else is going to relate. So the goal was to make this all in one supplement that would really help people. Like they could throw it in their smoothie or their water and really feel like they were getting those benefits plus the gut healthy benefits, the prebiotics, the bloating, etc. So it was me that wanted to do it, but I wanted to do it. There was a few greens on the market already, but they all were difficult to get down. They were very masculine oriented, and I was like, I want to make one for the girls that tastes good and is easy to incorporate in your routine. And truthfully, I always envisioned it at Target. Because to me, I need to be able to imagine the girl. And I was like, this is a Target girl. Like I know what else she's buying. I know what she's going for. She's getting those better for you brands at Target.
And the price point was more affordable. Like you always knew that starting out.
Yeah, we've always had more affordable pricing. That's important to me. My followers are all over the map. They're not in LA or New York, or they're all over the US. I mean, yes, we do have customers there, but I wanted to be as accessible to anyone because when I started my journey, I didn't have the money to go get, a $79 subscription based supplement. Like I had to be careful with what I was doing. And I think fitness and wellness should be for everyone. That's why I like podcasting. It's like putting free information out from experts and you don't even need to get an appointment with. You can just listen to them. So that's always kind of been my ethos with wellness.
Yeah. And, you mentioned you guys, were self funded for the longest time, selling out, putting every dollar in the business that you guys were making and going into, so from my understanding, you guys were selling direct to consumer. Your dream was always Target. You ended up getting into Target and Walmart. And I'm curious, I'm sure there's so much detail you can provide there, but How was that experience? Like, how did you, it's just very cool to think you had this dream and it actually kind of came about quite quickly relative to, when the greens powder kind of came out.
Yeah, in retrospect, it was quick, but from it from
In it,
my
it's harder. Yeah.
oh my God. First of all, they didn't even want to take a call from us. Like we were begging to take a call with the supplement buyer, Danny, at the time. He didn't want to take a call from us. He was like, people don't buy greens. Like, no, thank you. Finally got a call with him. He basically laughed in our faces and was like, no, this isn't going to work. Got another, it was call after call after call, pitching, selling the dream, telling him all about the products, and he kept saying no. Finally, we had some, data to share with him from, I think we were on Amazon at that point and Shopify, and just showing him the demand. We were picking up on our influencer program. Like it was more than just me at this point. And he was like, okay, I'll give you a shot. And I remember he gave us bottom shelf. I think we had total like two little rows. You could barely see the product. And we were like, yes, like this is all we need. So we really like took to our online platforms and we were like, guys,
Sure.
go buy at Target. Like, let's go. We need to show these people that we can sell the greens
No.
out. Sold them out. We were,
Amazing.
let me say this stat correctly. We were the number one selling supplement of that category of all time for 1 month. So like we beat all the numbers in that cap. So it took a lot of like proving ourselves. We're young, we're inexperienced. It's a greens powder. It doesn't exactly sound enticing to a lot of people, but we kind of proved ourselves. And since then, we've sort of been working our way up. Now we have end caps, displays in Target that are there, pretty permanently at this point, but it's been a journey. And Walmart has also been fantastic to work with. We've done collabs there with Vita Coco, and I love being in those retailers because I feel like for the girls who, wherever they live, maybe they don't even have a Target, they can go to Walmart. My husband is really like the retail guy, and we're in Kroger, we're in Wegmans, we're in
Oh,
Maya,
really?
Sam's Club, we're launching in Costco soon.
That's
So
huge.
it's crazy.
Yeah, and retail is no joke. And at least from, the women I've had on the podcast and friends, it's quite the capital. Like it's very different to have a direct to consumer business because retail also takes a lot of money up front, I believe, for like the end caps and everything. So you guys were still self-funded when you were getting into these retailers.
Yes. We were self-funded up until last year, and we took a minority investment from Nutrabolt.
That's huge. Okay, well, we'll get there in a second, but I actually did not know. So you moved to LA for the business, like before the business started. Where were you guys before? In New York, and what
We
made
lived
you
in
guys move here?
so we started the business in Boulder, Colorado. I don't really
Really?
know why. We just decided to move out there for a year. We're like, let's go focus somewhere.
Sure.
Moved back to Brooklyn. The pandemic hit. And it was almost this like, okay, well, we're going all in on this business. I was like the lead influencer of the program at that point. I was like, I need to be able to make content. We're doing all these photo shoots. LA just felt like the right place. So we moved to LA August 2021, I want to say, or
Oh,
20.
interesting.
We were there for 2 years. Um, that's where we built our HQ. It's where we really started to hire people. When we first got to LA, we were working out of an Airbnb for a few months. That wasn't great. So we basically had the team in our house every day.
Sure.
Ultimately, we jumped from WeWork to WeWork to WeWork, and then, found our HQ just over a year ago in Venice, right near Abbot Kinney. And obviously, there's a lot of influencer management talent out there, graphic designers, people in CPG. So it did feel like we were really in the right place to keep growing the company.
Got it. And kind of looking back, because it's pretty amazing. I mean, it's very wild how quickly you guys have grown and scaled. Like, what a roller coaster it's been the past few years. And I'm just curious, kind of looking at maybe the last 4 years, what would you say were some of the biggest inflection points? So, starting out, you had mentioned you've really cultivated this community. You brought them on the journey as you were building Bloom. I could see you really building trust and people really trust what you put out there. What other inflection points have really helped you guys maybe get to that next step?
I think getting in Target was a huge moment. It added a lot of credibility. It was like for me a huge goal. Establishing the HQ was huge for us. Most recently, launching our energy drink. That was a huge leap into a different category. Um, a really cool moment. Our influencer program changed the game.
And what
We
does
were
that look like?
so the business was incredibly reliant on me for the first couple years. Like I was the only person talking about it, promoting it. We brought in an influencer manager. She actually was an intern at first with us and just worked her way up. She is like 25 years old. She has like 20 girls underneath her. And we really went all in on TikTok. And I remember we were in LA having this conversation like who on Instagram should we sponsor? And I remember saying like, guys, I feel like the cool new influencers are all on TikTok. So we have a COO. His name's Leo. He's Greg's high school best friend.
Oh,
He worked
nice.
on, yeah, it's nice to keep it like in the family, but he worked on Wall Street for a long time. And he essentially recreated his Wall Street system in in Bloom with our influencer program. So basically reaching out to tons of people, sending out the product, seeing who liked it, seeing what worked organically. At this point, we work with thousands of influencers, but it was really cool to see the product help people from all walks of life, whether they were like nurses working the night shift or students or moms, just women of all, different walks of life. And that really changed the game for us as well, because I feel like it made the Bloom name just more expansive and people were learning about Bloom outside of me. Like people know about Bloom who may not know who I am, which is the goal ultimately. There's been a few really cool moments, but
That's amazing. And would you say when you guys really doubled down on TikTok at the time, you were reaching out to also like micro influencers as well? Or what did that, is it just across the board, all kinds of influential people?
I think at first it was a little more across the board, like let's see what works, let's see who this resonates with. But as we've continued, I think we've learned the types of people that work the best for the product. And I do think micro influencers can be so powerful. They have really loyal followings, cult followings. It's more about like who can speak to their community the best and genuinely loves this product in a way where they're gonna like incorporate it in their life and share it in the best way. Like for example, we worked with an influencer called Mama Calls Carly. She is a mom in South Carolina. She has a big, actually I think a pretty like cult TikTok following, and we did a collaboration flavor with her, orange
Oh,
passion
cool.
fruit, and it did amazing. And it was like this really cool moment where her community was really rooting for her, and we threw her an event for her friends and family. So we really like to tap into those creator communities.
I love that. I love that. That's so beautiful. How fun is that? And, I'm curious, kind of looking at all this growth that you guys have had, what would you say has been maybe one or two of the most challenging things for you? Whether it has been how you've grown as a leader, maybe it's been the amount of work and maybe the burnout and new kind of lifestyle you have to adjust to. Like, I'm sure there's just been so much growth across all assets. So I'd be curious to get your thoughts about what were maybe some of the most challenging aspects of growing the business so far.
So obviously Greg and I are married and we're co-founders. That is not an easy thing to manage, and I know a lot of couples say they could never work together. I think Greg and I happen to complement each other really well with our skill sets, but that's not to say it's not challenging. For many years all we spoke about at dinner was the
Yeah.
business and the team and what's going on with this project. Like it's really difficult to separate yourself from your work and identifying yourself with your brand when your partner also does the same thing. And we were both so passionate about it. It was all we wanted to talk about. I do feel like as the business has expanded, we have our own corners. I'm in all the branding creative meetings. He handles everything else. He's the CEO of the company. I feel very grateful to have him. I've definitely experienced burnout along the way. For the first 3 years of Bloom, we had a very lean team. We did everything ourselves. We did customer service. I was the head copywriter for a long time. My whole life was Bloom. So I think a lot of sacrifices had to be made. Like we didn't have a super active social life. We didn't really go out. Bloom was our child. It was hard, but I'm so grateful that we pushed through it when we did. You know, we were younger, we had a lot of energy, we were super excited about it, and I still am. But now I feel like I'm able to lean into things outside of my work too. Like I have friends, I have hobbies, which is really nice. I think also just being the face of a brand can be challenging sometimes because you're held to a different standard, and there can be some pressure there, but I also wouldn't trade it for anything. I love being the face of the brand, telling the story, connecting. So yeah, it's definitely not without challenge, but I think it's worth it in the long run.
Yeah, I feel like those few, like the early years, I mean, it's not like things get easier, but when you have zero team and it's just you and, your co-founder at the time and you guys are doing everything, it's like such a blur. Like even for us, I'm like, I don't even know what happened those past 2, 3 years. And I always wonder, like, do you need to give that all to get things off the ground? And I want to say, kind of talking to everyone, you maybe do. Like, because you're just so excited. I do think you have to, stay healthy, get your sleep, eat well, maintain a good movement schedule. But I'm very curious just to see, like, do you think that you need to put in that work and those sacrifices very early on to get anything off the ground?
I do. I really do. I don't want to sugarcoat it because I think some
Yeah.
people would love to paint like a fun picture about it, but it's like you do kind of need to take that time and isolate yourself a little bit. If you want to do something big, it takes doing big, uncomfortable things for a couple years. I've seen people who try to do things on the side and it just
Mhm.
doesn't work, in my opinion. Maybe that's harsh, but
Yeah. And I always remind myself when things are tough, I'm like, if it was easy, everyone would do it, right? Like that's the barrier to entry is like you are showing up every single day. I mean, even for podcasting, like how many people start podcasts and they, no shade to them because I think you need to do what works for you, but they drop out because it's tough. So I'd be curious, talking about podcasting, you've been also doing it for quite some time and you're also running a business. Like, how has the podcasting experience been for you? Has it been tough to manage both? I would just love to hear anything around that.
I think like the average number of episodes people cap out at is 6. That's what I've heard. But yeah, no, I get it. It's like it's a full-time job. I started mine January of last year. I always have had a desire to expand my platform. I felt like there's only so much you can say in short form content. And
Sure.
I wanted to be able to also focus on other people other than myself. I feel like social
Mm-hmm.
media can be quite self-centered sometimes. And I wanted to platform other experts, ask questions. I'm very much still learning. This health and wellness space is massive and there's always things to learn. So I was very passionate and dedicated going into it. I knew it would be a commitment. Did I know how much work it would be? No. It's constant. Like you put one episode out, you're on to the next, you're editing, like there's constantly things to be doing, but it is to me the most fulfilling thing I've ever done. And I also think it's very beneficial as a business owner to also host a show. I think it adds a lot of credibility. I think it's great networking. I've learned a ton. I've gotten better at having conversations. I feel like it's added a lot of value to my life and everyone, people listening. So I feel really good about it. I'm excited to keep doing it. And luckily I have my partner, Greg, who really holds down the fort for me when I'm focused on this. But it's a balancing act. Like I go between sampling energy drinks and recording. Like my day today, I'm running all over the place, but it's fun. Like I really enjoy it.
Yeah. And I feel like you build that stamina. I remember in the beginning, because my husband has a podcast and I'm like, and he also has his own business. I'm like, how do you go from like an operations meeting to like a podcast? And sometimes he would even do 2 a day. I'm like, I am just so inspired. Like I don't have the energy, but as you build that muscle, now I'm kind of switching, I'm going to a finance, like could be reviewing finances right after this call. So I'm just sharing that because in the beginning it could feel like a lot, but once you get your groove and you find your voice and what you're enjoying, I feel like it is, like you said, one of the most fulfilling things you could do. It's not easy, but it's so rewarding. So I always love people who talk about the podcast. So fun.
Totally. And I love listening to them.
Yes, 100%. And I like what you said about long form. like
Yeah.
there's only so much you can put in a short form social media post or whatnot. And I feel like it's just, it feels really nice. And especially, you do also meet with a lot of experts. It feels like you're actually adding value and you can go into all the questions that you have, which is really nice. Like you're genuinely helping people with the education, which is also such a great feeling. So no, big fan. So I'm curious, you guys, you had mentioned, or actually, I don't even think we talked too much about this, but you brought in a partner. I think you mentioned end of last year, so fairly new.
Yeah.
What was the intention around bringing someone in? Because you're still majority owners, but what was the intention around that? Then I'll ask you afterwards, like, what's next for Bloom? Because I feel like so much has changed for you guys within the past year.
So the intention was we wanted to make a beverage, and we have not much experience in the beverage space. We wanted to bring in a strategic partner. I do think there's a lot of like chatter around raising money, and you see it on LinkedIn and whatever, and it sounds really glamorous, but in reality, the process took a year. It was super stressful. We found someone, Doss Cunningham, Nutrabolt, who he owns C4 Energy,
Okay. Oh,
works
great.
with, yeah, Keurig Dr. Pepper, has so much experience, is also just a great person to work with, really intelligent, has tons of experience and knowledge. And it was really the perfect partnership. And I feel like having Nutrabolt's help with our energy drink launch, having their the knowledge that we don't have mixed with our marketing tactics, the way we like to do things, was kind of the perfect synergy. And it's been amazing, honestly. The perfect partnership for us, and it has definitely changed things. Like I feel like we stepped up things up a notch, and the drink is currently exclusively with Target until January. I believe it's the number two ready to drink at Target right now, which is crazy,
Amazing.
wild.
Big congrats.
Thank you. And it's obviously just a lot more of a competitive space, like
Yeah.
Monster, Red Bull, big names. But I really felt like no one was doing energy drinks the way I would want them done, for the Bloom Girl. Like I wanted them to have more gut friendly ingredients, really good flavors, natural caffeine, a little less caffeine, but still enough where you get a good boost. And I'm obsessed with them. We have 4 flavors right now. We have a lot more coming. We're starting to really ideate on what more we want to do. We also recently launched colostrum, which was a big success. And yeah, just really excited about, continuing to expand our product line, because for a long time we were really just focused on greens.
Totally. And, you were mentioning like you were really the main formulator to come up with stuff. You came up with the idea. So, what does a team look like now? How big is the team? And do you have like a formulations team that has been helping you with these new products?
Yeah, so on the Bloom team, we have close to 100 people now, which is wild.
Amazing. Yeah.
Majority women, a lot of young women on the team who are like our demo, which is fantastic. In terms of formulating, yes, we do have a formulator on the team. We work closely with food scientists and manufacturers. Also, here at Nutrabolt, they have an amazing team that we tap into. We were just in the lab, there's a tasting lab in the office, and we were tasting a new flavor this morning.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah, it's really fun to be hands-on and figure out what's going to do well, and seeing what flavors are the preferred flavors. And yeah, it's been really exciting, and we're excited to see, where it goes.
Oh my gosh. Well, Mari, I so appreciate you joining. I feel like we could talk for hours about your journey, but just so inspired by you as a person and everything you guys are building, and love hearing about your new life in Austin and this partnership and the energy drink and the colostrum. So many fun things, but this was such a blast. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, guys. I really appreciate it.